right. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's 11:01 for me here in I like to say sunny Phoenix, Arizona, but it's kind of always sunny. So let's just say almost 100 degrees Phoenix, Arizona. But it is early June, so exciting times. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited today. We generally get 25, 30 people on the call, but I look a lot at the Zoom analytics, and there's a lot of people that come in and watch the call. So you know, I I like smaller sessions like this because we can really have some intelligent conversations. And on Tuesday we talked, pretty in depth about relevance. We showed some workflows in there, and so I reached out to Scott and Daniel, just friends of mine, and I know that they know more than me, and when it comes to this kind of stuff, and I thought it would just be really a good opportunity to kind of just have an open chat about AI, right? So if you're on the call, like this is going to be probably the most informal session we've done up to this point, where just it's okay to ask questions, right, and talk. There's a lot of note takers on the call, so maybe it'll be a lot of us talking and not a lot of questions, and that's cool too. But Scott and I have had some in-depth conversations about AI to some extent, and we both kind of think a lot alike around what's coming, what's happening, and Scott's done a lot more in Daniel in the agent space than I have, right? I like to think I know everything about AI agents, but in reality, I just know the tools to build them. So I thought it would just be a good opportunity to kind of have that discussion, and then I'll keep an eye on the chat, or even if we want to make it a little bit more informal, if you just want to speak up and unmute yourself, feel free to. But Scott, why don't you start off a little bit and just tell me about a little bit of your background? Same with Daniel, and just what you guys do, and what you're doing now and what you experience.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it, Josh, and excited to be on the call and chatting. So, for anyone listening, just a quick background on kind of how Danny and I got into it, and then how we met Josh, and why we're working with Relevance in the first place. We both come from nerdy backgrounds. That's how I always intro it. I come from actually a bachelor's in biochemistry and mathematics. That's when I first started learning software engineering. Even landed a job in it, started really enjoying building projects. And, that's when I realized that I liked building my own projects more than I liked building someone else's. And what I quickly learned from that was that building good products do not get you customers. And so that's when Danny and I went down the treacherous route of starting to learn what it takes to actually do marketing, sales, and understand how technology kind of is incorporated with all of that. In doing so, a few years fast forward, we do run a small agency where we do a lot of marketing and growth operations. And in doing so, over the last year and a half, 2 years or so, we really wanted to leverage all of that technology background. And my partner, Danny, he comes from comp sci as well and has done quite a bit with AI before the same. So we saw a lot of people kind of struggling, a lot of very basic tools that weren't really serving the market the way they needed to. And we couldn't even help our clients use a lot of these generic AI tools, to the extent that we got so fed up that we decided, should we just build some of them? And in doing so, when we built some of them from scratch, we realized that there is a decently large gap, and there's a lot of things you can do even inside some of these complex tools to help people build truly custom AI solutions for their business. And so the reason I give all that context is more so because we've built a lot of these things entirely from scratch, what you'll see here in Relevance. And over the last few months, we've had the opportunity to work with platforms like Relevance on a higher level, and found that it can really cut a lot of those extremely complex operations out of a lot of companies' workflows, because there's a lot of opportunity on them. So yeah, that's kind of the intro and the rundown and the potential of Relevance, and I'm excited to chat about it.
Yeah, you just made a ton of great points there, right? So I don't even know where to start, but I love what you said, like, and I think I fall into kind of the same mantra where it's like, I know how to build really cool shit, and I think you guys do too, right? Like, but what does that mean for a product, right? What does it mean for a customer, right? Like, I guess probably more than me, because I tend to interact with people who, you know, kind of have already dabbled in AI and they understand what an open API key is, and you know, have some version of understanding of what Clay is. And because, you know, most of my customers today come to me because I'm already a Clay expert, right? Or already an
Right.
instantly expert, or I post something really ridiculously stupid on LinkedIn and they're like, that looks cool, but I have no idea what that is. And people actually tell me that when I get on a call. Like that looks really awesome, but you know, and I know you've experienced that too, but I think it comes down to like, what is your opinion? Like, my perspective is that the vast majority of potential customers have no, they know what AI is, they know what ChatGPT is, but they really
Mm-hmm.
don't know much else, right? And their impression
Right.
of AI is ChatGPT, and like they don't have any idea of how to turn that into something functional that generates real return on investment for your business. Is that kind of what you experienced too?
It's definitely what I've experienced. I've also found that because of the trends of marketing right now, so many of them are focused on like the same saturated areas of promoting AI that a lot of the people that we get on the phone with think they know so much, but they only know one part of like a piece of LLMs or something like that. They don't realize how much potential there actually is for AI in their company, and they don't understand like the vastness of it all because they've only been told that, you know, this little form of chatbots is all of AI because that's normally what they're pushed ads for. And so we've gotten that quite a bit. I think I had mentioned to you on one of our meetings externally to this, you know, we've even wound up getting a lot of larger custom AI projects that, you know, go beyond the scope of LLMs like OCRs and things like that, just because people would just get on the phone knowing they needed AI now that they get so many ads and thinking like, can we throw AI at this? Can AI do this? And they're like, yes, but it's not your basic LLM. It's a completely different project. But absolutely, like that's often where we find people in their life cycle of AI and not really having a vast understanding, but knowing it exists and that they should be investing in it right now.
So it's almost like we prepped this call because you're just feeding me things to say. But you mentioned OCR, right? So I'm going to tell you just a quick 2-minute true story, and then, but I want to tell it because I want to talk about just how fast all this is happening, right? So
Mhm.
I was a product manager just a little over a year ago at a big insurance company, right? And one of our projects that we managed was integrating OCR, and we had it was about a 3-year project, and it started in 21 and it was wrapping up in 23. And we spent about $7 million to integrate OCR.
Yeah.
And as technical as it ultimately got was there was some kind of, I wouldn't call it an LLM. I'd call it a predictive model that was
Sure.
built predominantly in Python that did you know, a certain level of sentiment analysis, right? Where it was
Right.
just like, this is this type of doc. Let's just speak generically for an insurance company. Like, this is a policy doc versus a claim doc, right? So that's
Right.
where this tech was a few years ago. Like, people
Yeah.
were engaging with these big vendors and spending astronomical amounts of money. How easy is that to do today with AI? Is my question.
It's like night and day. I think, you know, I can talk on our examples because another one would be we had, so part of our team had worked on a pneumonia identification project, which is similar. You need extremely complex computer vision, especially at a high confidence interval, to assume that it's actually identifying it right. That was something that was started, I don't know, 5 years ago now. And it took years and millions of dollars, just like you said. We did something similar in the traffic space. Like I had mentioned to you, that was the next OCR project. And that was less than 500K net. So you're thinking like 10% fraction of what it costed before, not to mention the original one took years since it's entirely from scratch and data wasn't as readily available as it is now. And this took less than 2 months, like in reality, to get the core thing out. I think a more interesting example, though, is Andrew Ng, someone who's way bigger than us, but really good in AI. Is he always jokes that even starting a lot of these LLM style projects from scratch with some of his largest ones would cost a minimum of around 10 million because you'd need an engineering team of roughly 60 to 100 people to get one of these projects off the ground. And now it's something more like, if you really wanted, you could step into Jupyter notebooks and finish it in like a couple of days and have the equivalent quality of a model. It would cost you
Yeah.
maybe $500. So it's like unfathomable how fast it's growing. And to think that this is the worst it will ever be again is crazy.
Yeah, I love that last statement. This is the worst it's going to ever be, right? So
Yeah.
isn't that, I guess I have two directions to go, but to that exact point you make, right? Isn't that universally true for AI voice and video and everything else, right?
Yeah.
This version of GPT, which I just made a video like 15 minutes before this call about lead gen with GPT and how ridiculously simple it's getting. But for free, by the way, with, because now the GPT-4 Omni is free to everybody. But like, isn't that a true statement for all of it, right? Like lead
Yeah.
gen, cold email, video, voice, anything you can imagine that there's some component to AI. Isn't that just an amazing fact that today is the worst it's ever going to be?
Yeah. That's always what my father and I are saying when we're telling people, like, they're like, well, the voice is still a little robotic, but it is pretty human. We're like, yeah. And again, this is it. Like, it's only better from here. So enjoy it. Like, you'll never see it
Yeah.
again. And the little bit that you know how to make it better than what it normally is right out the box is like, that's your edge for maybe a month or two. And then it gets better. Like, that's it. So it is pretty crazy. It's mind boggling to see how fast it's growing. Like I said, as someone like you and I who have been looking at AI for 5-10 years plus and seeing how it's progressed for the last 6 years and then the last like four or so, it's just been wildly explosive. So exciting but crazy.
Yeah, and I want to go one other direction, especially related to OCR, because it's like we planned this conversation. But I was watching, the nice thing about this group, I think it's up to 350 people. People came in because I made LinkedIn posts. My team did a little bit of outreach on Facebook as well, but all people we'd engaged with previously. But a lot of it's been purely organic, right? I just met with some guy today that, runs a pretty big company, and he's like, I want to learn more. And I was like, just come join our consortium. Like we decide what we're going to talk about the day before, but it's fun stuff and it's organized. So I was in the WhatsApp group either yesterday or the day before. And I like to go in there and just look at, because when I started, I thought, like I'm going to have to just post stuff and people to engage. And it's gotten to the point now where I think we have 100 of the 300 that are in the consortium that are in the WhatsApp group. And like people are making Loom videos for each other, like showing them how to
That's
connect
amazing.
API calls. And so it's gotten, and I just can't, I love it because it's like this, the biggest free technical resource I know of people just that are geeking out all over the same stuff you and I and Danny geek out over. So, but it was funny because there was a use case in there where someone was talking about using Relevance to scrape multiple PDFs, right? Which is OCR, right? And I just wanted to talk about that for a minute, right? Because I don't know that people realize is that, from a lead gen perspective, there's people like Apollo and Instantly and Zoom Info or whatever, where you can go buy data, right? And a lot of that would be role based, right? I need a founder here, et cetera. There's obviously with Clay, you can go in and drop in LinkedIn profiles and Google business profiles and stuff like that, but still very narrow in the aspect of that. But there's a whole realm of businesses out there that there's this ungodly amount of data, but it only sits in a stupid document, right? Like just
Right.
think about court docs, for example. Like there could be, but I don't know that there is a true robust API that I can go look at civil records, right? But
Right.
maybe my services is like mediation, right? So I need all my leads and targets are sitting in all these PDF documents, right? Like a year ago, you couldn't drop a PDF in ChatGPT and ask it to do anything. And today, at least as of like, and I saw your post on this, like a week ago, you can drop an Excel or CSV or Google Drive doc into just GPT, and like you no longer need a data analyst, right? I mean, like just
Exactly.
jobs are just going away. Like you can write formulas, like I think I know I'm talking a lot, but I think I remember the point I said this somewhere in the last week or two. It was like to get a job at a corporate company 5 years ago, you had to at least know Excel, right? You had
Right.
to be able to, like, maybe you didn't have to write a formula, but you had to like be able to do a pivot table, right? And
Definitely.
like do some basic stuff. And like a week or two ago, like, I mean, I know that GPT has had data analytics built into it
Sure.
for a while, but just like, here, connect your Google Drive and now take this sheet of 500 rows and do
Yeah.
conditional
It's
what if
crazy.
formulas, and like, and it does it all for you. It's just sick. So I guess going back to my question, like, do you think with Relevance or even GPT or some of these other models, like I love Cohere, by the way, where they're doing embeddings
Cool.
and
Awesome.
adding tools and stuff, like, are we going to be at a point in 6 months or a year where it's just basically like you prompt Relevance maybe or some kind of other tool and be like, I need to analyze these 50 GPTs that are stored at this location, and this is the output that I need?
I feel like I have to take the Sam Altman approach on this and say, like, the reality is, while there's a lot of jobs that I definitely think will be removed, it'll be the ones that are the most medial and like finally create the opportunity for a lot more jobs at the higher level. I think at the end of the day, there will probably be a lot of people more dependent on prompting, like you mentioned. Like the reality is, there will be a lot of mechanisms where you're probably interacting with AI more than you're interacting with like a human to get something done at a company. Just like you said, like some people who become data analysts will probably be more closely in line with prompt engineers that know how to work with an LLM that will do the data management for a malleable document. But I also think it'll boil down to knowing what to do with it, because I think one of the points that you made that's super important is these things all take a lot of like additional structuring, where relevance and tools like that give you a ton of opportunity to build on top of them. Like, for example, if you're hoping that something's going to be extremely contextual based on previous experiences, documents, and resources, and you feed that to ChatGPT, despite its ability to, work and manipulate the data, it's not going to have such context pre-existing unless that's something that you're feeding in long prompts, which it's going to lose track of anyway. But when you take tools like Relevance and others that are going to let you have some of these more complex knowledge bases, history tracking, and advanced prompt and conditionals, this is where I think there's like a lot of opportunity that someone may actually be interacting, yes, all day in prompts, because it actually gives the opportunity when you can build some of these products as complex as you can with such simple matters. Honestly, there's a lot you can build in tools like Relevance without even coding. Like Danny and I built some pretty complex things that I can't even imagine what it would have taken to build a few years ago, how long we would have been in Python and doing all the APIs ourselves and the JSON file packaging. And it's like, now we're just kind of connecting some dots, drawing some lines and writing out some prompts, and it's done. So to answer your question, honestly, I think a lot of jobs may turn to how well can you interact with AI to get something done, not to mention how quickly it will happen. But I mentioned the job side from Sam Altman's take because I do think it'll open the door to a lot of jobs where companies normally don't get to place as many people at the higher levels because of sustainability purposes. But for the first time, this kind of opens that door, and it might actually project a lot of growth and open a lot of new positions that were never an option for a lot of companies, especially that we've seen where normally we're placing AI in their infrastructure because their operations are barely profitable because of how expensive it is to even fund the team at the rate of growth that they need. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I could definitely see some people being in prompts and apps all day instead of whatever they were
Yeah.
doing before.
So last question, then I'm going to ask you to kind of show us a little bit of, kind of what you've
Sure.
done in Relevance and stuff. But do you remember like 6 months ago, I'm sure you keep up this stuff than I do, like the hottest job in AI coming forth was going to be the prompt engineer, right?
Sure. 900K a year,
And
maybe. It
yeah,
was like
right.
crazy bad.
But it's interesting, right? And I read this article from this dude in Medium the other day, and I've kind of seen some of this myself. Don't you kind of feel like the tools are allowing anybody to become a prompt engineer? Like one of the biggest tricks I use all the time, and I use you can use any tool. I use Poe because I like it because it can interact with it's like Relevance and it's like Open Router, and they probably built it on Open Router where you could just call every API you want.
Mm-hmm.
But like pretty much every LLM that's out there. And
Right.
so the reason I use Poe is I just go in there and say, I want to write a prompt that does this. And then it writes
Yeah.
the prompt for me. And 95% of the time, it's structured well. It's really, really good. And maybe I have to tweak it a little bit. But like I just remember 6 months ago, I'd go into Clay to try to create copy, and that's one of the things that I didn't really care what other people thought. I was going to send my emails with AI from day one, right? And
Right.
it's funny, like 6 months ago, everybody thought I was stupid, but now you see more and more people coming around to the fact that it can be done, right? So, but you can't do that well unless you get good at prompt engineering. But I've
Right.
noticed over the last couple months, right? Like the trick is don't try to write a great prompt from scratch. Just tell a GPT to write the prompt for you. So I guess that's my question. It's like it brings up just an interesting idea of the fact that are these LLMs are going to get so smart that they ultimately don't have to really be prompt engineered. They just have
Yeah.
to be given the concept of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm definitely on your side. I know some people still disagree. There's still some higher level prompt engineering positions that are out there. But in all reality, I think the like evil goal of a lot of these giant LLM companies is how well can we democratize like access to advanced AI? And they are doing everything they can to basically kill the need for a prompt engineer. They want anyone and everyone to be able to use it by talking basic English. And so I do something similar. I mean, I'm almost always in Claude asking, what should I ask Claude or ChatGPT? Like, what should I
Mm-hmm.
say to it to get what I want? And it almost always gives me something that I can work with and very lightly tweak. And once I've done the basic testing of does this work before I push it to scale and run it 1,000 times or something, um, I've never really struggled with prompt engineering in the second half of AI's explosion for the same reason that at this point I can get pretty much anything I need from it. I mean, even on visual levels, because of where it is, like I can even take advanced images or mid-journey images that I want to replicate the style of and say, what would you put to mid-journey as a prompt to get what I want? And it'll even do all the analysis on visual techniques as well. So there's almost nothing that I can't replicate in some degree with AI by asking AI what I should say. And so that's why I mentioned even the relevance aspect. And I see this being mentioned here too, is I agree. Like, I think it'll be about architecture more than it will be anything else. Is how do you structure the actual architecture and pipeline of what the AI is running through to get you the response? And that's, again, one of the biggest advantages of something like Relevance is for the first time, we don't have to jump into Pinecone and host our own vector database on
Yeah.
AWS just to have it actually take context additional to a long prompt. So yeah, I definitely agree with you.
And it's funny because like I built I can't remember what the use case for, but I needed a Pinecone database to vectorize the data. This is probably a year ago. And like
Yeah.
then they were brand new, right? And it's just
Yeah.
it goes back to I've said this a couple times lately, but it's like every new iteration of someone else's model, like all these startups are born and then all these companies die, right? And it's just
Yeah.
it's a killer place to be in because you're just watching like best example is like I've seen a couple of companies pop up in the last few months where they do certain aspects of like cold email, right? Like a particular part
Mhm.
that's difficult, right? And then I think about it and I'm like, you know, maybe a good example is like there's Apollo, and I'm not picking on them, but there's Apollo and they charge a certain amount to get leads. And
Yeah.
then there's the fact that, last weekend I built a GPT that called an API that pulled verified emails from
Oh, I saw
ICPs,
that.
right? For
Yeah, that was
one
awesome.
thousandth of the price, right? So, and I am not like I'm just screwing around. Imagine someone that was serious about it, right? So
Yeah.
it's just an interesting evolution. But and that was a great comment, Dominic. So thank you for making that. I feel exactly the same way. Like there's one other thing I want to talk about architecture, and I don't know that people realize this, and you can keep me honest, Scott, but I read a lot, I watch a lot of videos, I follow some dudes that talk about AI like at a whole nother level. And they live and die by what Sam Altman says. and does, or you know,
Yeah.
the board member that tried to fire him, and then last week publicly said why. But it's an interesting it's interesting to watch the billionaires talk amongst themselves. But one of the things I think which is interesting about AI is just that it's happening so fast. And I read an article probably a couple of weeks ago about architecture that I thought was really interesting. Is that if you're like Scott and I, you're always kind of like, when's GPT-5 coming, right? You know, when's what version of Google Gemini or Claude or even Cohere, like all these kind of top tier models, even Llama, right? Like what are they? Because you never know. Like the next release, like if you watched a couple weeks ago, OpenAI GPT-4, and they haven't released this yet, but I mean they pretty much demoed multiple times, and I've already put it on my desktop, the Mac app, which is pretty awesome, by the way.
Oh
But
yeah.
like they demoed the capability of like this kid and his dad, and they're holding up the phone, and this voice bot is talking to them while they're using the camera to look at the homework, which is like calculus or something. And it's
Yeah.
coaching him on how to do the calculus. And we're not talking about like vapey or bland level AI. Like this is like truly conversational
Yeah.
AI, right? And they haven't released that capability yet, but it's
Mhm.
coming, right? Like it's part of this model that we have access to. So I guess what I was going to say is when it comes to architecture, and you can keep me honest, but this is what I read, like the amount of data and the expense, it's in the hundreds of millions that it takes to train these models. Like in some cases, they're actually like having to be cognizant of the fact that they're using so much cloud computing and server power, like to not take down power grids, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it is so phenomenal to think that, and people don't know, if you don't follow OpenAI or some of these big guys, they're all only after one thing, if you don't realize it, and it's AGI, right? They're all after
Yeah.
AGI. They want to replace human level intelligence with these bots, right? And that's the
Mhm.
definition of AGI, a very basic essence, right? So, I just think it's great that we brought up architecture, because I don't think most people realize, like, we're talking about like taking down the power grid level of training it takes to build these, and hundreds
Yeah.
of millions of dollars. And so, to your point a few minutes ago, and I think that's what it's about, it's that it is all about money, right? Don't forget for a minute that OpenAI's goal, yes, while they're democratizing AI, at the same time they're firing their security board and then rehiring other people. Like it's all about money.
Yeah.
And I think that's a relevant point for the people in this group, because we're all here because we run businesses, is that your strategic advantage to understanding this just grows every day,
Yeah.
no matter what niche you focus on. Like none of us can be experts in it. I can't understand what it takes to train an LLM to the point where you can take down a power grid. But if I can understand what component of that I can utilize to make money in my business, that's what's important. Right. So I think that's just a good segue. And yeah, Nick, I definitely will. I'll definitely share some of those YouTube channels that I follow, because they're just, it's a couple guys and they just speak at a totally different level than I always try to surround myself with people like Scott that are smarter than me, and then I learn something. But I think it's a good segue. Like why don't you show just kind of some of the stuff you guys play around with in Relevance and do? Because I've introduced it to this group, and I
Okay.
think, a lot of people thought it was really cool. I've even seen people already in there since just Tuesday.
Oh,
But,
nice.
you and I kind of met by accident. We started talking about relevance, and I was like, holy shit, this guy does a lot more than I do. Uh, you and Danny. So, like, whatever you want to show, it's all the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah. I will probably hop in and show a few things in just a sec on screen share. And then there are certain parts that I have Danny, like I rely on him to build as well. So I'll have him walk through
Sure.
some of it so I don't have to stumble on it. But just to end off and answer what you mentioned, I agree. Like I think in the current state of it, it's that there's really only two things these companies are dumping all their investment money into, and it's data at scale and it's compute at scale. And there's literally proof of them spending, upwards of 13 billion behind OpenAI across their data and computations. So like that probably shows you that a majority of their costs, if not almost all of it, is dedicated exclusively to acquiring enough data and being able to train it constantly. And so it's kind of fun to play with these tools and see how we can take advantage of it while 99% of people in the world have no idea what to do with it. And so that is kind of like the gap where I know, Josh, you play in that field as well as us, that we come to a lot of companies and kind of show them like, this is how you can leverage it. Like, let's walk through even some of the simplest ways, or what feels simple to us is oftentimes extremely foreign to a lot of teams. So that's just me stalling to share my screen slowly, but here we go.
Well, and I think that's another point I just want to hone in, because we're all of us in some capacity probably sell. And, I would tell you, you're right on the money. And I think that's an important point we all need to remember, is what we're all in a bucket of people that have some level of understanding of AI at a more advanced level than most. But what we think is simple, it's often highly complex to people. So just keep that, we want to keep that in the back of our mind as we're trying to sell whatever we're selling, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So jumping into it though, this is kind of what it looks like at a dashboard level. I'm in a safer account, like just an example account where sometimes we'll build out demos or mock-ups for YouTube or whatever we're doing. So no worries here. They're all kind of just light frameworks for them. But I think it'll be perfect to give you guys an idea of what we're actually clicking around in. And so Josh, if there's certain things that are too medial that you've already gone over, just let me know and I can bounce out of them. But for anyone who isn't familiar, this is normally what you're going to see inside of Relevance. This is just a homepage of where your tools are. There's really 3 ways you can approach using Relevance in terms of this workforce. And this is what I'd keep in mind mainly before you do anything else. So you have data, you can kind of store it in 2 ways. This is what you're going to use, 1, for your knowledge bases, but 2, you can kind of treat it like an Excel doc or something like that, where we'll do rows, and I'll kind of exemplify it a little later on once I've justified what it looks like. But here's just an example of something like this. But you could also upload something like PDFs and things like that. As I mentioned, this is where you'll use vector databases. And for anyone who isn't familiar with vector databases, super quick rundown. It's like if you took every single word or picture or image or piece of data or even audio information and you like condensed it into this blob, and you made it super easy for AI to pick out what it needs to read instead of going through a long document every time. That's what you do. And so that's what we are typically leveraging to add a massive amount of additional context to any conversational AI agent that we're leveraging when we build it for a company. Because the reality is, super long prompts to just ChatGPT or something really doesn't cut it to make an AI model act as an expert on any one company or topic. And so anyway, this is where you'll store it if you're using Relevance, and that's all inside of data, which you'll see here, just some examples. Then you have tools. These kind of function like AI agents if you were to specialize them on any one single task. And what Relevance has done over the last, Danny, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's been 2 or 3 months it's been here. They introduced the agents. Maybe it's longer now, I'm not even sure. But either way, tools, you can make it act like an agent, but in actual agent forces, you can make little specialized AI agents that can even work together if you pay for the more expensive plan. And what you can do is basically build a small AI workforce or team that's hyper specialized on a majority or a number of tasks. And so we have some roundabout ways on how you can sort of do that without paying for an entire team of them. But I will tell you, as someone who's kind of worked with both levels, there is a lot of opportunity if you are signing clients on or helping people work or using it in your own business at the agent level as well, but not a necessity. So just to exemplify what it even looks like, I wanted to show kind of 2 examples here with Danny and walk through what it actually looks like inside of a tool, and then what it looks like inside of an agent and how we're kind of leveraging multiple actions and conditionals. Danny, did we agree we wanted to look at the LinkedIn one?
The personalized outreach one.
Top left on this one? On tools? Okay. Okay. So first things first, when you click into something like this, you're going to see the ability to use it. So this is if you almost like appified the front end, you were to send people here and just kind of use it blindly. But of course, you're building it in the first place. So this is where we start. Now, when we go through another example, I'll show you a knowledge base in action so you can see how it works. But there's a couple of things you're going to handle at the top level. You're going to handle the knowledge base that you're handling. So that's what I just showed you in data, and you'll be referring to those and plugging them in here to be utilized. Then you're going to have user inputs. This is where you're making variables that you're actually self-creating, like what should you be considering? For example, I also showed you a data piece that looked like an Excel doc. And so we're going to be wanting to use a variable that's one of those columns in order to create something else with it. And in this case, it's taking a LinkedIn profile as the string, and I'll show you how it fits in. But this is essentially what we're returning from that column and how we're going to pass it along in this tool. And so from there, this is where we actually start carrying out the actions. So you can think of this sort of like if you were to more efficiently plug in AI to a bunch of steps in something like a Zapier workflow map or something like that, where you're automating a lot of steps, but now you can conveniently use different forms of AI at pretty much every step that you want. So first things first, we take that LinkedIn URL profile. So we have a few links, and again, I'll exemplify this in a bit, but we take it and we get user profile and we start the scraping. So this is where we start grabbing all the information from the URL. Then, as you can see by the name, this is where we're feeding a prompt to AI to tell it to actually go grab information. So we're telling it to go through, pull the company website URL or whatever we're doing, in this case, LinkedIn, and then return all the information or return only the URL from it, right? And so one more thing to keep in mind, and what's the huge advantage on Relevance, is that you don't have to use the same AI models at every step. So there's a lot of places here as well where you can make this even cheaper. For example, there's no reason that something this simple needs to be done by anything other than, GPT 3.5 or even something cheaper if you really want, because that's pretty easy to go through. But I'm just checking the chat. Oh, okay, cool. So from there is the LinkedIn scraper. No, this is happening inside of Relevance. That's one of the advantages. Danny, this one's just here, right? We haven't used anything else on.
Yeah, LinkedIn scraper is native to Relevance. It's a really sick feature. They're one of the few that did it.
And another example, Dominic, would be, you can even take things like we've built out for some people when they'll book leads in or something like that, and you get the company URL and other information, even if it's not LinkedIn. We can provide like a Google scrape and then analyze all the information and research it and compile that into relevant topics to selling points for the team. So you can give all of that research done to like a sales agent, right? Before they even have a meeting. So they don't have to go do all the research and compile it. So it's not just LinkedIn.
I was going to ask if you could.
Serper. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, if you could you explain that to me one more time, a little bit slower? I picked up on most of it, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, sure. But Josh, what were you going to say first?
I was just going to say, so, and they're using we're not talking like typical Google searches, right? They're using like the Clagent structure where it's like GPT and like SERP AI or API or something like that, right?
For Relevance, you mean like what are they using behind it?
Yeah, like within Relevance, like at least from what I've seen, like they're using like APIs to scrape. When you talked a minute ago, Scott, about just the like going out and getting web data, like they're using some Clagent type architecture where it's not just basic Google searches. It's like they're using like SERP, SERP API and stuff like that to go in and get the data. I was just pointing out like this company knows what they're doing because they're not just doing like basic tools like you talked about with the LinkedIn. They're like, they basically built like their own Clagent as a tool where you can just plug in and, as Scott's showing, you can use GPT or any model to like orchestrate all this, which is what's ridiculous. So sorry to cut you off.
No, it's all good. It is ridiculous because when we started before Relevance, Danny and I would build our own scrapers, and it was actually a nightmare because of how much information you had to like manually sift through or tell or teach like the model to not address on Google. So you wouldn't just scrape like random ads and random like basically garbage websites at the top level. And so you wanted to find actual relevant information. So then you had to have AI check everything you grabbed from websites to make sure it's actually relevant before you did it. But Relevance takes care of all of that for you, which is amazing for us because exactly what you said, they have a lot more work behind how they're actually grabbing the information than most people realize. So definitely recommend it. But Dominic, to re-explain what I was saying that another example is we mentioned this is just website extraction in general. It allows us to go through LinkedIn and take information from there, but it could be from any website. So one thing I exemplified that we've built up before is a company had a lot of inbound leads, but then the sales team, there's always a cutoff or gap where they have no real context of what the people are. So then they have to look them up for a long time. And it kind of cuts down how many calls they can take. Because if it takes an hour of research, you've already lost a lot of time. Not all of them take an hour, but you get the gist. And so an opportunity here is something we built was when someone fills in all their lead gen form, they book their call, et cetera, they put in their basic, pain points, they put in their typical like revenue range, their website link, maybe their personal profile link or something like that. And so you can do something similar where you might use several layers of it and you might have it go look at the social profile and the website, do a lot of research on it, compile all that information with another AI command here to make sure it's actually summarized. And then you can put that up against a comparison to the knowledge base you plugged into something like this, which gives a ton of context on the company the sales rep is representing. And it can compile an actual list or PDF or doc, putting together exactly what the selling points might be for the biggest pain points the person's facing, as well as a lot of context and research on any of their companies. So that's a really helpful way to save a lot of time, for example. There's a few other ways we've used it, but I won't go too in depth right now. And so we mentioned doing this for the URL return. This is where we're actually going to start doing the website extraction as well. So we want it to be returned through text. And just to clarify, like at the bottom of each of these things, this is what we're returning. So we're basically making variables at every step so we can use them later on in these processes and make sure we're never losing track. So for example, this process is going to return us LinkedIn scrape. And so that's why we're using it later on, as you can see some of these things like company URL. And so now we're looking for company URL answer, things like that. Where was I? Right here. So we return it. This is where we're actually going to be telling AI again, the scrape. So this is where we're actually creating, this is how we refer to variables. There's other ways you can do it in the prompts, but Danny and I have just found in personal experience that referring to these things as variables inside of this before you create anything else are really helpful. So for example, we have our website output variable that we've created. And before we feed the prompt to GPT 3.5, as you can see what's selected here, we're actually just going to call it right here. And we're going to say, hey, this is scrape. Here's the information in the variable. And now we can refer to it later when we need to, like go through the scrape above. So that's where we're doing this. This is just what we found to be the easiest way above and give a small summary about what they offered and what other socials they are on. And so this is where we can actually start to look at other things. And so context really quick on this tool. We did it because we found that a lot of people appreciate how in-depth research can be in our outbound messages, like taking a look at all their socials, seeing what their followers are, what they sell, what their program's called. But similarly for an SDR, this takes a ton of time. This might take 30 minutes in comparison to writing a message that takes 10 seconds. So you might get like 9-10 messages out a day, when in reality, if you had AI doing the tool and automating all your SDR research, you might actually get more like 50 or 100 messages out a day. And so similarly, we built this tool to do something just like that. And so this exemplifies how we would take it from one link, go do research on the entirety of a single human being or company, and then start compiling that by going outbound from it. And this is when we get into the actual message writing. So again, we're passing the links like the information we passed from LinkedIn and the actual information on the business so we can know the name of the program and the offer. And now we're giving it the actual context for its command. And really quick, this is why I mentioned that splitting up these prompts and actually chain prompting is what makes this, in our opinion, way more powerful in terms of architecture, like we mentioned earlier, than if we tried to just feed all of this in one go to something like GPT and hope that it actually came back with this just if we gave it internet access. So we tell it to do all this, make a personalized outreach message, give it some context. We also have messaging structure for ours. Of course, that's not what you guys have, but this is just kind of what we do to get things going. And then we're going to return our message. And so that's pretty much it. and then you get your tool output. And if you wanted to use it, well, I'm not going to use it right now, but this is where you would do the profile, you would type it in, you would do it anywhere. Again, you could run it on the data. I have too many Zoom things up, so I'm trying to get over. But that's pretty much what a tool looks like, utilizing all the different components that you could have in it in Relevance. I think what would be helpful in the next like 5-10 minutes is if I quickly walk through how that's adapted for an agent, which has a little bit more potential. But before I do, does anyone have any questions, or Josh, do you have any thoughts you want to throw in as well before I jump into anything else?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it, right? And I think we talked a little bit about this the other day, but the power of relevance is, just the ability to be able to create whatever tools you want, right? And then and what you're about to show, right, is probably the next level of that, which is turning that into an agent, right? And there's all kinds of tools out there that say that they're AI agents today that connect to GPT-4 and do some version of, conversational AI. What's so different about this is just saying, okay, and I've done a couple of these where it's just like I built my own version of Claygen, right? And I just took a tool that Relevance had already built and then turned it into an agent and have it do a full-blown, process. And even in Relevance, they make it easy, like connect it to an email, connect it to a GPT, not GPT, but an API, a CRM, right? And just like that, you have an agent that you built, the tools that run the agent, and those tools can be as complex as, that you can figure out to get them to work. They can even call APIs, right? So it's pretty crazy.
Exactly. It's really crazy. It's an amazing tool. And I'm excited to see kind of what they add as well. There's a few tools that play in similar fields, but Danny and I followed the team a bit at Relevance, and they're an incredible team, and they're making some really cool stuff. So it's a lot of fun. Okay, sweet. So I should start here. So if you pick an agent, this is basically the page you would get to in the generics. So this is, again, just a couple mock-up ones to exemplify it. And so I think what would be most helpful is walking through our generic inbox manager one, just to give an example. This is the page you'll see where you see what's going on, like testing and tasks and things of that nature. But to actually configure it, you come over here. And so this is where you're actually going to build it. This is I think the easiest way to start breaking it down is to start over here on actually defining how it works. So again, as I mentioned, what I find to be one of the most powerful elements of more complex architecture is that when you have multiple layers of knowledge and information being fed to it, it proves to be more effective. And so this is just going to be your base instructions, like your generic prompt that you're feeding to it. This is what you always wanted to consider at the underlying form of this task or this agent. And so this is us just telling them you're a member of Black Box Theory, everything else, read the incoming emails, decide if the email is spam or doesn't need answers, check with your data to find relevant information for the email, and write a draft back. And something I should mention before I go any further is what is the purpose of this agent? So you know what I'm actually educating and working towards. And so Black Box Theory, one of our companies that Danny, my partner, and I run, and in general, we get way too many emails. And I bet Josh and many of you on this call also have this problem where there's just too many emails coming in on a daily basis. And there's a potential for AI to help you just make life easier, and especially businesses, because it's probably a nightmare for a lot of them as well. And so we decided, can we give a bunch of context, centralized inboxes for a particular company and have all the questions answered? But also we needed to be identified first to be understanding, is it spam? Should it even be answered? Should this be raised to someone of higher nature, like one of our team members who would handle inboxes for anything that's too complex? Can AI draft the responses for us? And can it even send it at the end of the day so we can just stay out of inboxes entirely? And so that was basically the task going into this, but we built it at a simpler level for now, just for the demo. And so then we set rules. We've set the tasks that we wanted to take, but now we want to set rules to tell it what to do with that information. So at rule 1, we wanted to write professionally and friendly. This is where we're handling tonality, as you can tell. And then we're telling it, don't forget that you're actually a team member. We never want it to actually, misconnect itself to what it is or how it's responding. And then lastly, we wanted to only respond to emails about Black Box Theory. And so this is kind of a double check. Again, we've handled this, and you'll see a second that we've handled some conditionals as well. And of course, we don't want it hallucinating. So this is an easier way, but again, this is where knowledge bases come in. But this is always a reminder, and I recommend you do the same if you have hallucination problems where, for example, like our company's name is black box theory. So AI loves to just think it knows black box because black box theory is an actual scientific theory that has to do with like things being confusing and peeling it away and being hidden inside a black box from A to B. So sometimes it gets a little confused and we don't want that. And so this is where we kind of step in to do it. There's some additional advanced settings, but for the sake of what we're building, I wouldn't really worry about it right now. Then one of the most interesting, in my opinion, parts of Relevance is actually the workflow. And so you can see inside the workflow, this is where you're able to handle basically like a decision tree of conditionals. And this is how you move things along. This is what Relevance is considering as it progresses through any one of your actions for a single agent. And Danny and I are a pretty big fan of it. There's a lot of potential that we probably haven't even explored in it, to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, this is the idea of how we're actually able to pass manually. Like, for example, in this case, it's like read and decide if it's spam. And so this is AI running at its own level. This is AI doing it. Then in the condition that it is not spam, right? Or if it is, we say, do nothing further. If anything else, continue. And we're able to literally do this like writing it with a human hand. Like this is just normal human text instead of having to go do something complex and Zapier or Make, where we'd have AI at every single level, and then we would determine it and split it up ourselves. Relevance able to do this entire decision tree just in a single line of us writing simple prompts to it, which is really, really cool for us as someone who's had to build them out dozens of times, and it's always miserable. And so now we can write the email back, and lastly, use that email to create a draft back to the user. And so that's pretty much all there is to it. Then you come back up here. And so this is where we're able to start tracking the information. And so I don't know if it's easier, Danny, if you want to take it from here just to show it in action and potentially finish up the top parts, you can probably provide more information to me here. Do you want to like share the exact same thing, or do you want me to just click through for you?
Yeah, I can just share the same thing.
Okay, let's do that.
So easier.
And then just be mindful, I think you have like 5 minutes.
Okay. And can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. So picking up where Scott left off, he was talking about the labeled tasks. This is strictly for tracking and just the human side of knowing what the AI is doing. It doesn't actually affect anything within relevance of how efficient it is. This is just so you know what the AI is doing, and if there's any problems, you know what step it is and what's considering. So here we have the names of each task on the top part, and then when they're supposed to use this name is the second part. So example, we have reading the email. This is the first step when it's immediately just analyzing the first incoming message and deciding what to do with it. Then the next task, deciding what to do with it. Now it's analyzed. What is it even doing? And then writing the email, setting up the draft. These are just some sample tasks. You can go as granular as you want or as general as you want. It's completely up to you, just so you know. But where the agents actually get super interesting is in the tool section, because this is actually where you give it actionable steps that it can do. And for this, just for the sake of it, it was two simple tools we set up, which was actually writing the email and then setting up the draft to be sent back to Gmail. I'll go through each tool right there, actually. So here, this is the email writer, which was super simple, but the change after the last tool you saw is definitely the knowledge base. This is where we pass information on our company so it actually knows what to write and talk about. And what the AI passes is the message that's going to need the answer. It is decided here. The AI completely handles it. It knows it by describing when to, right here. This right here is what tells the agent when to actually use that variable, what to put in there. This tool knows that it's getting an email because we said that in the description. So it's going to pass the user's email. What this tool does right here is takes the user's email, which is this right here. Then it considers the background information, which is our knowledge base. And then it writes a super simple email back to that user, kind of just going over its context and making sure it is appropriate. That's the only thing it sends back. And then immediately after, it will actually create the draft, which is this tool that takes in all the contents you need for an email, and then fills them all out in a Gmail that's connected to ours right here. And another thing I wanted to mention about the tools is this little category right here, which is very important for testing and making it fully autonomous. This decides how the AI can run the tool. So here we have auto run. This means that the AI will run it whenever it wants. If it thinks it needs to write an email, it's going to write an email. It's not going to ask you a thing. If you do require approval, this means when it thinks it needs to write an email, it's going to ask you if it can write an email. And then the last option is let the agent decide. This means that the AI and the agent will think if it needs approval for this, or if it's so certain that it'll just do it on its own. This is very interesting. For fully autonomous, you're gonna almost always use auto run. There's kind of no other reason not to, but that's how that works. So let me just show an example of it working really fast, just to kind of show it. So we'll create a new task really fast. This is just kind of one we had. This is my personal email, and I'm just going to say this is the email as it follows. Write a return for it and create a draft for us. So we will send that task. You can kind of see it working live. And here is where you can see what it's doing. See, it's currently going over, reading the email, deciding.
Yeah, just know we can only see this relevance window if you're going to show admin.
I'm just pulling up the email so we can actually see what it's written.
Yeah.
So after this, it says it has set up a draft. So let me go ahead and switch over for you guys. One second. And then here, you can see it's fully connected to our Gmail. It actually makes a draft email that we can send and edit. We only made it send a draft so we can actually confirm and basically make any changes we need, but you could make this fully send it too. This was just our decision to just make sure it's all perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's one example of an agent handling multiple tools we've given it, which I showed you an example of one tool. Now imagine giving multiple to one AI agent and letting it do basically whatever it needs. And right there, we could have our entire inbox autonomously handled. And we could also directly connect that to other things like SMS or social media accounts, assuming we have the API backends or just about anything else. So yeah, that's it.
So real quickly, Dominic, I saw your question. Is there an API that puts this draft into your Gmail? Actually, no, right? You can disconnect your Gmail account, right?
Yeah.
I know
right.
that's, I know definitely on the input side, you could disconnect your Gmail account like through a normal connection. So guys, there's so many more questions I know we could ask, but Danny and Scott, thank you so much. I think, just in a very short period of time, we've kind of all demonstrated like how, even with putting a little bit of effort into a tool like Relevance, you can create an AI agent that's probably better and more marketable than 95% of the ones out there that are being sold.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, that's the crazy part about it, right? So hopefully that will kind of spur the group to, spend some time learning, Relevance and just understanding the capabilities of, like, I think of it just as another tool that just illustrates how far along we've come. Just if you just use the day that ChatGPT launched, which I learned the other day, the board didn't even know was going to happen, which is kind of a cool part of that story,
Yeah.
to where we are today, like what is coming, right? So thank you both for a great discussion, a great demonstration, and really appreciate you being here. I know we don't have a huge amount of people on the call, but I know a lot of people just go back and watch. So thank you both. Really excited just to keep talking and see what you guys do. And again, thank you for everything. And I'll let everybody enjoy the rest of their day.
Yeah, and thank you, Josh. Always fun to nerd out together, and I appreciate everyone who did come in. Hope it helped.
Yeah. Indeed, guys. Have a great day. Thank you.